Chapter 8, Add Employee Wizard. The Employee Wizard is the tool you'll use to add all of the employees and elected officials into the software for payroll purposes. We go to Payroll, Maintenance, and from the function list we're going to choose Employees. Notice that there is nobody listed here, and you see the Add Employee button at the top. Once you start adding your employees, they will be listed in this box. On page 13 starts the overview to the Add Employee Wizard, and pages 13 through 27 give you some step-by-step instructions of walking through each section of the Payroll Wizard. You might want to read through that section before you watch the section of the video. If you stop, you may want to stop the video and read through these pages and see what you have to have ahead of time. We've given you a new employee checklist in the appendix of the book. You'll find that. You can cut those pages out and copy them for your use in adding new employees in the software or adding your existing employees for putting them in the UAN software. The new employee checklist is organized so that the data is in the order you need as you go through the wizard. The guided exercise starts on page 28 with adding our fiscal officer, Brutus Buckeye, as our new employee. So from Payroll Maintenance Employees, we click the Add Employee button. We come into the wizard in the Welcome screen, and at this screen we see the 6 steps that we'll use to add a new employee. You may notice that if you've got employees that don't have overtime, non-cash benefits, or leaves, you'll be able to skip those steps. But everybody has to have employee information, withholdings, and earnings. We're going to move through the wizard by clicking the Next button at the bottom of the form. Although the big blue arrow is tempting, if you click it, the software will just simply give you a message that you'll need to click Next below to move forward. So we'll click Next and begin. On page 28, you'll see the employee form that shows Brutus Buckeye. So the very first thing you need to decide before you start the employee wizard with your first employee is, how am I going to identify all of my people in payroll? Everybody has to have an employee ID. If you're a small entity and you know everybody by first name, then you can use first names as your employee ID. If you're a small entity, you can use last names as the employee ID. And I know that some of you are going to say, well, I have 2 Marks or 2 Bobs. What do I do? Well, you can put in their first name and last initial. You can put in their last name and first initial, and if you've got a junior or a senior, you can use first name with the junior, first name with the senior. So before you even begin the wizard, determine how you're going to identify your employees and create an employee ID for each person before you start. Please be careful with your employee ID. You'll be able to edit the name and address of the employee at any time, but the employee ID is going to be spelled this way the rest of the year. So before you click Save, make sure that you've got the spelling of the employee ID correct. In our situation, we're just going to use the last name and the first initial for our employee ID system. Some of the larger entities, you may already have an employee numbering system in place. There are entities using the software that have over 100 employees, and they have to have a numbering system to keep track of them. So if you're a very large entity and you already have a numbering system in place, you can use the numbering system as your employee ID. So we're going to use page 28 to complete the fields that are required. Notice on this screen the green fields are required fields, and there are also a few of the white fields that will need to be completed. We're going to enter the address as 101 College Lane. The city is our made-up village of Buckeye, Ohio. And this is not a correct zip code for Buckeye, Ohio, because it doesn't exist. Now notice there are email phone, emergency contact fields that you can use, but you're not required to complete them. The first field after the address that's necessary is the Social Security number. We're using fake Social Security numbers for payroll training. The 9s will work one time. After that, it will tell us we're repeating them. Our hire date is going to be important. So many of you who are setting up the payroll software for the first time, there may not be a personnel file where you can pull up the hire date. You're going to need to investigate that. It's going to be important. Employees that were hired before March 31st, 1986 don't have to withhold Medicare. But every single person hired or elected after March 1986 must withhold Medicare. It's only those that were elected before and have had continuous service since before March 31st of 86, those that were hired before and have had continuous service before that date and continuing on. So there are still folks out there that have that early hire date. You need to put in the correct hire date for your employees, and you're going to have to research that in some instances. You may want to check your OPERS files. In the old days, you had to complete an OPERS Form A, and that would have contained the hire date on there. The birth date is optional, but if you put it in here, it's going to reprint on some reports. So don't put it in if you don't want birth dates printing on reports. The state retirement area is only required for folks that are going to be members of a state retirement. Brutus is going to be an OPERS member, and I will not be able to create a paycheck unless I put in an OPERS member date. The OPERS member date may not be the same as the hired date. So if you have any confusion about what OPERS wants as their member date, the same with OP and FPF, you would contact them so that you understand their rules about the member date. Fill in that date, and if it's an OP and FPF employee, you would complete also the hours base field. Our next section is in the lower corner. See the area for the sex, male and female, and the status, full-time and part-time. The status is going to be important for only the ODJFS report. Internally, you can mark it how your employees are hired. Your full-time employees, if you have full-time marked, the ODJFS quarterly report will complete with 13 weeks of credit and all 3 months check marked. It's just an automatic completion of the form. For an employee who's marked part-time, the ODJFS report will have their name and their wage information, but the fields for the number of weeks worked will be defaulted to 0, and the months worked will be blank. So just as you've always done manually, you would look at their time cards to determine how many weeks of credit they will receive and how many months they actually worked. So in the software, that's what the full-time and part-time do. Many people who have part-time employees that work every single week, they just don't work 40 hours, use this field and mark it full-time. You wouldn't want to mark a part-time intermittent employee. If you have somebody that works part-time but only sometimes, you would never want to mark them full-time, so they would default as 13 weeks and all 3 months checked. So that's the only thing that this setting does in the software. It's up to you how you use it. And remember that a lot of questions say, well, how am I going to mark an elected official? It doesn't matter. You can mark them whatever you want. Elected officials don't pull into the ODJFS report, so it won't have any effect on any item. Track hours by pay period is the default, and that's what you should be using. The track hours by day is a future enhancement. It is not ready in the current software. You would receive communication from us when that is available to you. So don't mark it until then. Track hours by day is explained in the manual, and I won't go into that now. I just don't want you to use it at this point in time. It would create more work for you. The tax exemptions that you see here are going to come from your state IT-4 form and your federal W-4 form that the employees and elected officials complete for you, that tells you how many deductions they want, and for federal purposes whether they're withholding at the married or single rate. If you have employees that want extra withholdings coming out, that'll be handled under withholdings as a supplemental. Here you're just going to list their deductions. If you have direct deposit, EFT is going to be activated on your software, and you would complete the fields for electronic fund transfer. Once we complete all of the required fields, we click Next. And you're going to receive this system message. Note that state and local government employees hired or rehired after March 31st of '86 are subject to mandatory Medicare coverage. Be sure to add a Medicare withholding. So what I want you to remember is, if somebody starts working for you as a part-time employee in 2013 and they tell you that my wife told me that since I'm retired I don't have to pay Medicare, the law says that anybody hired or rehired after March of '86 is subject to mandatory Medicare withholding. There's no way around that. So if they haven't had continuous service since a hire date before March of '86, you can't exclude them from Medicare. Go ahead and click OK to that system message. And it takes us to Add Employee Information, the additional information field. Remember in our example, we set up some additional information fields that we wanted to use. You may not have done that. So if you did not choose to use additional information fields, they won't be pulled in here. But these were the sample ones. Remember we did the safety workshop, and in the background we had added CDL license. So if you're keeping track of these additional information items, you may have something that can be completed on your Add Employee Wizard. Sometimes that's added later when they attend the safety workshop for that one. So once you've completed the additional information fields that you want, go ahead and click Next. The software shows you that the new employee, Brutus Buckeye, has been added to the software. And what that means is, at this point in time, if I quit the wizard, Brutus has been added, and I would complete his setup in Edit Employee rather than re-entering the employee wizard. Notice he's listed now as an employee, so I wouldn't go back to the wizard and start another one. I would just complete his setup using the employee edit mode. So at this point we're back to the welcome screen. It shows us we have completed step 1 with the green check mark, and we're moving forward to step 2, Add Employee Withholdings. And Brutus's withholdings began on page 29. And we're going to move forward to the next step by clicking Next. When you enter step 2, you see all of the withholdings that are automatically attached to every single employee. State and federal income tax withholdings are automatically added. You cannot take them away. The deductions that an employee chooses, and they're married or single, will determine where it looks on the tax table for tax purposes. An employee who makes very little money or a trustee who makes very little in a month will probably have very little or no withholdings for state, but it'll be based on state or federal, but it is going to be based on the tax tables. You should not be overriding that to withhold less than their W-4 would indicate that their marital state and their withholding number of exemptions would give them. To begin adding the rest of the withholdings for this person, you're going to mark Continue Adding Withholdings by clicking in the circle. That's called our radio button, and we'll click Next. And remember, we got the message that Brutus was hired after March of '86. We have to add Medicare. Notice also in the upper right screen, the withholdings have an icon, the % symbol. We're going to use these symbols to help you on the support line. When you call and you say, I'm stuck doing this, we can ask you, what screen are you on, and you'll tell us the symbol in the corner and we'll know what you're doing. They're very helpful for helping you. From the drop-down list, we're going to choose Medicare. And the very first employee that you add, the Medicare rate will not be entered. Notice that there's a goal of 1.45%. So what it's showing us is that when in the withholding setup, we want the employee share to be 1.45%. Your local legislation will determine where you complete the regular or the fringe boxes. In our sample entity, we don't have fringe benefits. We have regular Medicare withholding. So the employee has 1.45% taken from their wage. If you have fringe benefits, you would put the amount that your entity covers of the employee. Sometimes it's split, sometimes it's the whole amount. Your legislation is going to determine that. When you don't have fringe benefits, you leave that box 0. Notice that our total and our goal match. Moving forward, once that first employee is set, the rest of the employees will default to this setting that you've created here. We'll go ahead and click Next. Medicare is a type of withholding that has an employer share. So the software needs to know where are you going to pay the employer share of Medicare when this employee is paid. So the very first employee we have, Brutus Buckeye, is only paid from one account. And I know some of the fiscal officers are paid from multiple accounts, but we're going to start simple. Brutus is only paid from one account for his wages, so we can use the no split method and say that the employer share is going to come from only one account code. So from our drop-down list, notice that when you hover over there, you get the drop-down arrow, and when you click on that, you get the drop-down list to appear. We're going to choose the 1,110,213 Medicare account, and you pop that up in the box by either clicking on the up arrow or pressing Enter. So I've completed the employer share. Notice that the appropriation accounts tab has employer share in parentheses. This is going to be important for you to notice, because when you click the Next button, for those of you that don't have fringe, it looks like the screen has not moved. But notice also at the top of the form where it says Add Employee Withholdings, it shows you that you're adding, this includes a fringe benefit employer share, although the value may be 0. So you are on the fringe benefits tab even though it looked the same as the appropriation accounts employer share tab. For those of you that do not have fringe benefits, the software has defaulted to the very same setting you put on the employer share tab, and you would leave that as the default setting for the fringe tab. Those of you that have fringe benefits, you're going to follow your legislation. This may be correct, but if you pay your fringe benefits from a different account, you can select that account from the drop-down list to correct it, or you can delete the account that's listed there by clicking the big X. You could have a different split method, but in our example, Brutus only has one earning account, and therefore his employer share would be paid from the same thing, and our fringe, we don't have fringe, so I don't have to worry about it. Let's go ahead and click Next. And that shows we completed the process of adding Medicare. It's listed above with state and federal. Now we still need to add all of the other withholdings that are listed on page 29, so we're going to mark Continue Adding Withholdings and Next. And from the drop-down list, we're going to choose OPRS. And OPRS Gov is the type that we want. And again, this is the first employee that's going to use our OPRS withholding, so there's nothing in the default. We see that the goal is 10%. And in our fake entity, we don't have fringe or salary reduction, so the entire 10% will be entered under regular. For those of you that do have fringe benefits, you would put the portion of the fringe benefit that should be coming that is not paid by the employee into the fringe benefit box. For those of you who have salary reduction for their OPRS, put the percentage in the salary reduction box. Your total has to equal the goal. Notice that the important flashes, and that's not going to just be on your screen at home when you're looking at that. It's going to be on everybody's screen. This is important for everybody. You need to understand that the fiscal officer doesn't get to choose whether the withholding is going to be regular, fringe, or salary reduction. Those are legislated, and those are agreements with OPRS or OP&F. So you don't get to choose. You have to look at your legislation and look at your agreements with OPRS and OPF to determine if you have fringe and salary reduction. But it blinks on everybody's screen. Let's go ahead and click Next. And again, we have to tell it where is the employer share of OPERS going to come from. This is the appropriation account employer share. Because Brutus is paid from one account, we can leave the no split method and we'll choose 1,110 to 11. And you can click that, click Enter, click the arrow, or press Enter to pop it up in the box. When we click Next, the screen looks the same, except you are now on the Appropriation Accounts Fringe Benefits tab, and it shows you at the top. You are on the Fringe Benefits tab. If you don't have Fringe Benefits, you leave the default setting as it shows, exactly the same as your Employer Share tab. If you have Fringe Benefits, make sure that setting is correct, or correct it to how your legislation states it will be paid. Go ahead and click Next, and that completes the setup of OPERS. The next withholding that Brutus has is Buckeye Village income tax. So we're going to say Continue Adding Withholdings and click Next. From the drop-down list, choose Buckeye Village income tax. When you make your selection, it's going to default in with the 1% rate. That's how I set up the withholding. And I can go ahead and click Next. Notice that's all there is to a local tax withholding. School taxes work the same way. There is nothing else to do but add the withholding to the employee. Our next example is going to be health insurance. So we have a health insurance plan at our fake township, and the employees pay a percentage of that cost. So we're going to continue adding withholdings and Next. This is also how you would withhold any of the miscellaneous type withholdings. So from our drop-down list, notice that we have to use the scroll bar to see all of the items. So if you don't see an item, it may be because you need to scroll down further. We're going to select health insurance, and for Brutus, he's paid once a month. So I know his health insurance withholding once a month is going to be $154.27. Now notice the health insurance is a miscellaneous union type withholding, so you would use this same type withholding for an item like child support or garnishment. It's going to look exactly the same and give you the same options. If you have an employee that has child support, you would want to fill out the case number and order number in the bottom of this screen, because it will print on a report that can accompany your payment. The court order numbers and case numbers will appear on the report with the employee. So for those items of garnishment and child support, if you've got case numbers and court orders that you want to print, go ahead and mark those items here. For health insurance, we don't have that. There's nothing to enter in those boxes, but it is the same type of withholding. We'll go ahead and click Next. And this is unusual. This is the first time you've seen that. Notice that this is called a Skip Deduction tab. Now the default shows you that it's going to deduct from every single pay period. Well, Brutus he's paid once a month. We do want it to deduct from every single pay period, so there is absolutely nothing to do here except click Next. For those of you who may want to skip deductions, our next employee will have some skip deductions examples. But for Brutus, who's paid monthly, I am never going to skip a deduction. We'll go ahead and leave the default deduct from every pay period and click Next. Notice that it's added to the list at top, and we have another deduction to add, our dental insurance. We'll continue adding withholdings and Next. From the drop-down list, we're going to choose dental insurance. And the amount that's going to be withheld from Brutus's paycheck is $4.15. Notice that it defaults into the amount of 0, and then I'm going to put the amount that applies to Brutus. Go ahead and click Next. And I do want this to deduct from every pay period for our example, so we can click Next. And that completes all of the withholdings that we needed for Brutus. So we can go ahead and mark, I am done adding withholdings, and click Next. and it's going to move us to the welcome screen and show that we've completed step 2 and are moving into step 3, add employee earnings. We'll go ahead and click next. We come to the main screen and we have to start with continue adding earnings and next. Notice now we're on the $ screen. So earnings are, the icon for the earnings screen is the $. And with the earnings, you would have to type the name of the position also. Brutus is our fiscal officer, and we're going to type that. Once you type in a description, it will be available to select again from the drop-down list. We would never have a second fiscal officer, but for employee purposes, you might have several people whose position is maintenance. So once you type maintenance, you'll be able to pull it down from the drop-down list. The type is going to be very important for you to select the exact type that describes this employee. Notice that Brutus is a township fiscal officer, and it is listed there. Notice the other descriptions for trustee, counsel, clerk, clerk-treasurer, mayor, librarian, administrator, board of affairs, legal counsel, and other. Almost everybody is going to be other. You would only use the descriptions listed in 1 through 10 for those exact positions, never for anybody else. So notice that there is not a village fiscal officer listed here. You wouldn't want to select another item that would describe you. If you're not a clerk-treasurer of a village, if you're a fiscal officer of a village, you're going to be other. So these descriptions mean something, and you need to select only the items that apply to the person that you're adding. So for Brutus, we will choose Township Fiscal Officer. Remember that our departments are the groups that we have divided the wages into. I'm going to process an administration department because our elected officials get paid once a month at the meetings where everybody else is paid biweekly. So I'm going to choose administration, and the classification is going to be very, very important. Notice that the Township Fiscal Officer is not hired. The Township Fiscal Officer is elected. I need to mark that elected, and notice that when that was marked elected, the unemployment eligible box is no longer checked. Elected officials are not entitled to unemployment. Even if they were appointed to fill an unexpired term, they still fill the position of an elected official, and they are not eligible for unemployment. So a Township Fiscal Officer is elected. Even if you were appointed to fill an unexpired term, it is an elected position. But a village fiscal officer is hired, therefore entitled to unemployment. So what you want to make sure that you're doing is marking the elected officials as elected so that they don't accidentally get marked for unemployment eligible. Appointed in this position, on this screen, appointed is for those positions listed above. If Bob will click on the drop-down list for type, notice that you've got a mayor. You would still use, say your mayor resigned in the middle of a term and a new mayor was appointed to fill that unexpired term. Although he's appointed, you should still choose elected because it is an elected position. But if you are really dead set on using the appointed to show elected officials who are appointed in their seats, make sure you uncheck the unemployment eligible box. So in the type, the setting for appointed is really for those positions like administrator. A village may have an administrator. An administrator would be appointed. He is sworn into office as the village administrator. He is unemployment eligible. That's what the appointed box is for. It's different than every other employee who's just hired to fill an employee spot. Village administrators, police chiefs, fire chiefs, they're appointed and sworn into office. They're not elected though. So be careful your setting here and make sure that you're not setting elected officials as appointed with unemployment eligible. Okay, Brutus is a township fiscal officer. He is elected. Unemployment eligible is not marked. We move to the right side for the pay, and from the drop-down list, Brutus is paid a salary. and that salary is set by the state based on the budget. He is also paid once a month, so our frequency from the drop-down list is going to say monthly. And the rate of pay, for fun, we put Brutus at the top of the pay scale for townships, and when they're at the top of the budget scale, Brutus gets paid $2,348 a month. We knew you would find that funny. Notice the typical area box, typical hours box. It says typical hours per pay period, and it says it's required if prorating leave. Well, Brutus doesn't have leave. It's not required. So that typical hours box is only required when you are adding an employee who has prorated leave according to your policies. So we would recommend that you leave that box blank unless you have prorated leaves. The area at the bottom, for Brutus, he is not an OP&F PF member. You have areas for pay changes and probation, terminated, leave of absence. Those areas are completely optional for you to complete. OP&F PF employees must have the pickup code and the frequency code added. We have an example later. If you're not sure what codes to use, you would have to contact OP&F PF, talk to them about your pay structure, and they will tell you what to enter there. For our Brutus, we can go ahead and click Next. The next portion of adding Brutus's earnings is telling the software what account code the wages will be paid from. So he's going to receive a rate of pay of $2,348, and it's going to come from one account. So in our instance, it might be different than yours, but we're going to use the no split method, and we're going to choose the one account code that Brutus is going to be paid from, and that will be the 1,110,121 salary township fiscal officer staff. Oops, fiscal officer. Bob's put that in the row, and we can go ahead and click Next. And notice that we're looking at the list of withholdings we've just added in the last step. You can see that the state and the federal are marked differently. They are automatically attached to an employee, and they cannot be detached. So what we're missing here is the rest of the employees, or the rest of the rest of the withholdings have not been attached to this earning. The attachments are going to be very important. So if I want Medicare, OPERS, income tax, dental, and health insurance to come out of the salary, I'm going to mark these attached to the earning. And you can do that by clicking the header checkbox to select all items, or you can click them one at a time. And Bob's going to show you how to do that. Notice that if you check mark one item, it will show that it is marked. We want all of the withholdings attached to the earning, and think about that. For those of you who are in very simple setups, it doesn't make any sense to you that why wouldn't they just automatically be attached, but you're using the same payroll software that more complicated entities use, and they have different taxing districts that employees work in, so they would have multiple earnings with different taxing districts, and not every withholding would be attached to every earning. So for those of you that have the very simple setups, you're just going to click the header checkbox, mark all of the withholdings, and that attaches the withholdings to the earnings. For those of you with the complicated setups, you're going to look at this earning. If you were creating different earnings for different taxing districts, such as a library that had different branches in different villages with different taxing districts, you would want to make sure that you were typing the description for the salary and name it by the taxing district. So the village of Buckeye branch, so that you would know that Buckeye tax is applied to that, or the village of Little tax, so that it would be attached to the right one. So most entity setups are not going to be that complicated. Simply select the list of attachments that will apply to this earning and click Next. That completes the adding of the salary. Brutus doesn't have more than one earning. Some of you will have people that have per item wages, or another type of earning, and you would continue adding earnings until you completed that employee setup. But for Brutus's purposes, we can say I am done adding earnings and click Next. Notice we've completed step 3 and we're moving to step 4, add employee overtimes. And Brutus is elected. He doesn't get overtime. We can say Next. I am done adding overtimes is going to be our choice, and the Next button. Employee non-cash benefits is our next step. And Brutus doesn't have any non-cash benefits, so I would click Next. I am done adding, and add employee leaves. Again, he's elected. He doesn't have leave. Mark I am done adding leaves and click Next. And that completes the setup of Brutus. But we're not finished. The next part is the most important part. We're going to click on the Finish button, and the software wants to know, do you want to display the general information report for the new employee? The report is helpful for verifying employee setup accuracy. We get an awful lot of calls about people who have paid their employees incorrectly. They set them up wrong, paid them from the wrong accounts. How do I correct this? This could have been avoided if you would have carefully looked at the general information report once you set up or edited that employee. So we highly recommend saying yes to this. And I would say not only view the report, but once it opens up, click the Print button. Check the employee setup. It shows everything that you've just done to complete the employee setup. You can print it from the screen. Bob's going to click the plus to give us a little better view. And notice that we can see the federal status is married, the exemptions for state and federal. We can check the Social Security number, the OPRS member date, whether they're marked full-time, the hire date. Everything that you've entered can be verified. Look at the bottom section. It's showing us the earnings, our salary. There's his pay rate. It's a no-split method. The department is administration, and there's my appropriation account. I can check and make sure that I have entered the correct appropriation account. That's a common mistake. The wrong appropriation account paid the wages. Notice that right below the earning, we see attached withholdings. And every one of the withholdings that we marked with a check mark to attach to the earning is listed here. If you're looking at the general information report and all you see is Ohio and federal income tax attached, that means you may have listed the withholdings, but you didn't attach them to the earning. So everything that you see not listed here isn't going to come from the earning. Now look below. The software is going to show you all the withholdings that you added to the employee setup. But if they're not listed as attached, you didn't attach them to the earning, and the software will not withhold it. And if you've forgotten to attach Medicare and OPRS, you won't be able to create a wage. Notice also that you can see whether you set up Medicare with fringe, OPRS with fringe, or OP and FPF with fringe, and it also shows the appropriation accounts that you've set up to pay the employer share. You can see the amount that you set up for health and dental insurance. You can see why we would recommend this report to always print it when you make an employee setup brand new, or whether you've edited an employee, print the general information report to verify. If everything was set up correctly, you simply close. And you see Brutus is set up in the employee area, and you would be able to edit him at any other time when employee changes come along. Our next employee to set up, it begins on page 31, and our second employee is Steve Friendly. Steve is an hourly employee, and he's going to show us an example of an employee who has hourly earnings paid from multiple account codes. Therefore, he has overtime paid from multiple account codes. He's a full-time employee, and he also has several leave types: vacation, sick. He has comp time according to our policy, and holiday leave. So this is a more complicated setup, but he's really very simple. He has one earning, same pay rate, multiple account codes, and then all the things that go with a full-time employee in our entity with our policies. So again, on page 31, you can follow along in the book. We've given you a new employee checklist with the information completed. We click Add Employee, and it brings us into the welcome screen. And we're going to click Next to start the Add Employee information. And remember that we've already decided what our employee IDs are going to be before we enter here. So Bob is going to complete the employee field. You don't have to start with the employee ID. That's just Bob wanted to indicate, you know, the importance of knowing the employee ID starting. So Steve Friendly's name in there. Remember, you can't, once you save, you're not going to be able to edit the employee ID until the end of year. Usually we give you a choice. And Steve lives on Happy Street in our Buckeye, Ohio. And notice the email and personal contact and emergency contact information. You can fill that in if you like. For our purposes, these are fake Social Security numbers. The software knows when you're using a number that is not a real Social Security number, and it beeps at you. Or if you try to use the same one twice, you're going to get a message also. So we've selected fake numbers that are real numbers. They don't actually belong to a Steve Friendly. You will have to enter real Social Security numbers. Our OPERS member date must be entered. He's an OPERS member. And his tax exemptions, he's going to have 2 deductions for state and federal, and Steve is married. Notice that he's going to be male, he's full-time, and we're going to track his hours by pay period because that's the only available choice at this time. Go ahead and click Next. And we're going to get the warning that based on the hire date, Steve is subject to mandatory Medicare coverage. We won't forget that when we get to the withholding section. Click OK. And we don't have any information to complete on these at this time. So we can click Next to move forward. The software tells us it has saved Steve Friendly, so if we accidentally exit the Add Employee wizard, he's already been added. We would use the edit process to complete his setup, or like many of you, if you get interrupted and you have to quit, you can come back to the edit form and complete his setup. But we're going to move forward at this point by clicking Next, and his withholdings are listed on page 32 and 33. So we're going to mark Continue Adding Withholdings and Next, and choose Medicare from the drop-down list. Notice the percent symbol in the upper right corner. Notice that now that we've chosen Medicare, the default has gone to regular where we set it on our very first employee. So our total and our goal match because it's defaulted to the correct amount. For those of you that have fringe benefits that are different for different types of people in payroll, you might have legislation that says that only certain groups of people receive fringe benefits. You will have to check this very carefully and make sure that for the employee you are adding to the wizard, the fringe benefit and regular are set correctly. For those of you that have no fringe, it will continue to default at regular. Go ahead and click Next. And we're going to tell the software that since this employee is paid from multiple account codes, we would like the employer share to be split between multiple account codes. Now remember, for Brutus, he was only paid from one account code, so his employer share was obviously going to use the no split method, and we chose the one account code we were going to use. When you're going to split it between multiple account codes, you have 2 options. You can use percent split, which means that you are going to choose the account codes from the drop-down list. So you would select a Medicare, and notice that it requires a percent number. So Bob's just going to choose a couple of Medicare accounts. Notice that if I want percent split, I'm going to put the accounts in the box, and I'm going to put in the percentage that I want. So no matter where the earnings are paid, Bob's showing you how you can change this. Notice that you can change the percentages. Whatever your legislation or policies state, the employer share will be split by a percentage. And sometimes that happens in villages where you have water and sewer, and although the employee's hours between water and sewer would change from pay period to pay period, they're going to split the employer share of their Medicare and OPERS from an exact percentage, 50 and 50. So you know what you're doing with the employer share for these employees that are split. Percent split might be the option you want. However, there is an even better option if you would like the employer share of these Medicare and retirement to follow the earnings. So let's say, like Steve, this employee is paid from 4 different accounts, but he might work a lot of hours in cemetery one pay period and a lot of hours of roads the next pay period. Sometimes he opens the town hall for birthday parties, and sometimes he'll do something else. So I think in our setup we have a park district that he also does some work in. So his time card is going to show different hours for each. And instead of budgeting a percentage for the employer share, we want the employer share to always be proportionate to the earning paid by that fund. So object split is our choice. Object split requires you to choose from the drop-down list the object account that you want. Notice that Medicare is object code number 213. So what this means when I choose object split is I have a fund and a program the same as my Medicare account and the same as my earning. If I'm paid from $1,110, $190, then my object for the Medicare would be $1,110, $213. So object split is the best when you want the employer share to follow the earnings. Steve Friendly has 4 different earning accounts, and wherever his hours are entered and his pay is created, the employer share will follow proportionately. We'll see how that plays out in the end. Go ahead and click Next. And notice we're still on the Fringe tab, so we haven't left Medicare. The Appropriation Accounts Employer Share and the Appropriation Accounts Fringe tab look the same, but they mean something different. If you have Fringe, you would make sure that you set this page to match your legislation. If you don't have Fringe, you would go ahead and let the software mirror image the setting on the Employer tab. Go ahead and click Next. So notice in the upper box, Medicare has been added, and when you see the X's with the object code, that's going to indicate that you chose the object split method. Go ahead and continue adding withholdings, and we're going to add OPERS to Steve. So from the drop-down list, Bob's going to choose OPERS Gov. And notice again, our regular has defaulted in with 10%, which is good for our example because we don't have fringe or salary reduction. You can see that the important is flashing over there, and it flashes for everybody. It wants you to understand these are not chosen by the fiscal officer. Your legislation determines who receives fringe and salary reduction. For those of you that have fringe and salary reduction, make sure that this is set correctly for the employee that you're adding at this time. Go ahead and click Next. How do we want the employer share of OPERS to be paid? Well, once again, we want the employer share of OPERS to follow the earnings proportionately. So we're going to choose Object, and from the drop-down list, we'll select the Ohio Public Employees Retirement System Object Code 211. So wherever my earnings are paid, the employer share will follow. We click Next, and it shows us the Fringe Benefits tab, and we're going to leave the setting at 211 Object because that's what we want in our fake township. Go ahead and click Next. OPERS has been added, and when we look at page 32, we see that we also need to add Buckeye Village income tax as a workplace earning. He works inside the village limits at one of our locations. So click Continue Adding Withholdings and Next. From the drop-down list, choose Buckeye Village income tax. And notice that it defaults to the rate of 1%. That's correct. Go ahead and click Next. and Buckeye Village is added. Remember, that's all there is to a local tax. We have a health insurance, a dental insurance, and also a deferred comp to add to Steve. So let's continue adding withholdings, and next. And from the drop-down list, Bob's going to choose health insurance. Remember, you have a scroll bar to the right if you have more than you can see listed. And for according to our policies and for the coverage type he has, his biweekly withholding is going to be $37.50. So you're going to consult your policies to determine how much will be withheld. Now, because Steve is a biweekly employee, what that means is every 2 weeks he'll have $37.50 withheld from his paycheck. But biweekly employees twice a year will get 3 pay periods in 1 month. So when we click the next button, it takes us to the Skip Deductions tab, and I would like to show you how that's going to work. Because we have 3 pay periods in a year, I can mark the software to skip the pay periods marked below. I'm going to select the frequency that Steve's going to be paid, and that will be bi-weekly. And then notice the software shows me select any date within each pay period that this withholding should skip. So I have looked at my calendar. Remember that we're not talking about paycheck dates, but the pay period that the money is earned. So you would have to look and see where you have 3 pay periods earned and which one you would want to skip. And just for our example, it won't apply to anybody else but our own sample township. We're going to choose March 29th and August 30th. Those are the pay periods that we want to skip for our purposes. So if you are withholding something but you don't want it withheld from every single paycheck in the year, skip deductions will work for you. Go ahead and click Next. And we can see that the miscellaneous union withholding health insurance has been withheld. And we're going to continue adding withholdings and do our dental insurance the same way. From the drop-down list, we choose dental insurance, and his withholding amount per paycheck is $2.81 according to our policy. And I click Next. And I would like to skip the same pay periods for dental insurance because that's the month that has 3 pay periods. We select the frequency of his pay and mark the pay periods to skip. So March 29th and August 30th. Again, these are just sample dates. You will not use them for your purposes. Click Next. And our last withholding is found on the next page, page 24. We'll mark Continue Adding Withholdings and Next. And from the drop-down list, choose Deferred Comp. And notice that I've set that withholding up with the amount of 0. You might have only one employee that's using deferred comp, but later on another employee might choose to use it. So you would default that in at 0, and then when you attach it to the employee, as we're doing now, mark the amount they would like to have withheld. So go ahead and type in the $50 and Next. And he does not want any pay period skipped. He wants this to come out of every single pay period of the year, so we'll go ahead and click Next. That completes our withholdings for Steve Friendly, so we can mark I'm done adding withholdings and click Next. And the next step for us is step 3, Add Employee Earnings. Mark Continue Adding Earnings and Next. We're going to type in Steve's position, and you would find this on page 34 in the training manual. His position could be many things, but since he works in several areas, I've decided that the position that they fill is going to be called maintenance. So if your positions are legislated, you would want to use them specifically. Sometimes a person works in different areas of the township or village, and before you called them a cemetery worker or a road worker, but if they cross into different areas, you might want to call them workers, maintenance, laborers, but if you give the position specific names, it might force you to overcomplicate the payroll process. So we have chosen a generic name for what our employees do and are calling that maintenance. Our type for this employee, because there is nothing on the list that fills that position, I'm going to choose Other. His department is going to be the maintenance department. So from the drop-down list, Bob's going to choose maintenance. And then we look at the classification. He is hired and he is unemployment eligible. So I am not going to change those settings. On the right side of the form, from the drop-down list, I'm going to choose hourly wages. Steve is paid by the hour. His frequency is biweekly. And his rate of pay is $15 an hour. Notice that you could enter typical hours per pay period. We do not recommend that this box is used for hourly employees if they have paid leave. So you would want to leave that blank, and because it would overcomplicate your wages. There are fields in the bottom section of the Details tab that you can use if you like for their raise dates and resolution numbers. Those are optional. For OP and FPF employees, you must enter the pickup and the frequency. And for code assistance, you would contact OP and FPF. Go ahead and click Next. And we're going to tell the software how the wages are going to be paid. So Steve works in the township, but he fills several positions for us. He works in the town hall. Sometimes he cleans. Sometimes he comes in the evenings and opens the doors for birthday parties, and then he comes back and makes sure it's locked. So we've got several account codes. He also works on the roads, the cemetery, and the park. So we have to choose a method of splitting his wages into all those different accounts. It gives us 3 choices for split. Manual is the type we're going to use, so we'll cover that one last. Notice at the bottom of the list we'll start with hours. Hours should only be used if you don't have paid leave. We don't recommend that you default hours into the wage record when you have paid leaves. So if you don't have vacation or sick leave and things like that, go ahead and use hours to default wages into the hours into the wage record. From the drop-down list, you're going to select all of the accounts you need. They're listed on page 34. 1,000, 120, 190, 2021, 330, 190, 2041, 410, 190, and 217, 1610, 190. Now, just for display purposes, we're not completing the hours. If you know the hours, you could complete them as you're adding the accounts, but we're doing this for display purposes. If we always paid him the exact hours for every single pay period, and let's say he works 3 hours at 1,110 or 120, 190, you could enter the 3 hours. And he always worked 47 hours on the road, and he always worked the 40 hours, well, 30 hours. That gives him 80 hours, but only sometimes he works in the park, which is our 2171. You can list all of the account codes you may need and default just hours in where he is normally paid. So the key to adding multiple accounts is make sure you have all that you need. If you're defaulting percentages or hours, you can have account codes with 0. But you wouldn't want your total hours to be more than the hours in the pay period that you're paying. So when you choose hours, you're expected to enter default hours into the pay period. Bob's going to change the split method to percentage. And what that means is you have chosen the account codes and you're going to use a percentage to divide his wages. And this is a lot of times used for trustees where they determine that the general fund is going to pay a certain percentage, and then other funds that are allowed to pay the trustees' wages will be used. And sometimes trustees are voting at the beginning of the year how to do that, and sometimes they turn it in at each meeting. So you can set defaults of percentages, and the software will allow you to edit those at the wages. You're setting the default here. So notice that you can have account codes with 0, but you would have to have 100% in the total percentages. But you need all the account codes that you would want at the wages level. Let's go ahead and select manual. Manual means I need all of these account codes. He sometimes works and gets paid from these accounts, and when he turns in his time card, you'll know what those hours are, and you'll enter them at the wage record level. Sometimes those accounts will be 0, sometimes they will have more than others, but it's always going to be manually entered at the wages level. Very simple to use for a lot of the village and township employees. This is going to be the best setting. So once we've chosen manual and put in the accounts we need in, we're going to click next. And notice again, we have to select which withholdings are going to be withheld from this employee's paycheck. Notice that if I only check the boxes individually and I don't go past the screen that I can see, I'm going to skip some, because notice that if Bob uses the scroll bar, moves up and down, you can see there's more than I can see on the main screen. So a lot of times it's best, if you're selecting all of them, click the header checkbox to make sure you get them all. And for those of you with different taxing districts for each earning, you're going to make sure that only the districts that require the tax are being marked. And you'll understand that comment if you're a complicated setup. Go ahead and click next. Notice that the hourly wages earning has been added. He's paid bi-weekly. You can see all of the accounts and the rate of pay. Now for Steve, he doesn't need any other earnings. Some of you would add per item wages or other items, but Steve doesn't need any. So we can say I am done adding earnings and move on to our next step. We can see step 4, add employee overtimes. Click the next button. We're at the main screen where we choose to continue adding overtimes. And next. From the drop-down list, we would choose overtime. And we're going to mark the base rate of pay. Notice that the software shows us it's a time-and-a-half rate. So I just need to put in his base rate of pay, which is $15 an hour. And the software is going to multiply the overtime rate by time-and-a-half. And again, you wouldn't complete the typical hours unless you had an employee that always gets a set amount of overtime, and that's going to be very, very rare. So we'll go ahead and click next. The software requires us to attach overtime to an earning. So for those of you with a very simple setup, this isn't going to make sense, but those of you who have complicated setups, you're going to have more than one earning here. Overtime can only be attached to one earning. So if you have 3 earnings for 3 different taxing districts, you would have to have 3 overtimes to be attached to each taxing district. So this is a very simple setup. We have 1 earning, 1 overtime, and we're going to mark the box, or mark the circle, to attach the earning and the overtime. Go ahead and click next. The software is going to show us by default the same split method and account codes that we chose on the earning, and that's going to be usual for most people. If there's an account on here that they never get paid overtime for, you can eliminate that from the list by clicking the X at the right. But if it's correct, you would go ahead and say next. So you never know where he's going to work overtime, but it could be any of those you would want them added. Because he only has 1 overtime rate, we're not going to show you examples of more, but you may have more. We're going to say I'm done adding overtimes and click next. When we get to add employee non-cash benefits, Steve doesn't have any non-cash benefits. So when we go next, we're going to click on I am done adding non-cash and click next to skip that step. Our next step is employee leaves. And we're going to read the section in the manual. We would really recommend that you read the page 35 for the difference in attachments. It's going to be important if you have multiple earnings with different taxing districts to understand those. For those of you who have a very simple setup, it's going to be simple. You have one earning, therefore your leave is attached to the earning, and that earning is also the withholding group. So you want to make sure that you read those pages. If you have more complicated setup, read the pages in the manual that explain what those attachments mean. So let's go ahead and click Next. And we're going to click on Continue Adding Leaves. We're on page 35 in the manual. Whoops, Bob just pointed out that the instructions on understanding the leave connections are not contained on page 35. They are contained in the manual on page 24, 25, 26, and just the beginning of 27. And that's the introduction to step number 6, Add Employee Leaves, and it gives you some examples of why you would have odd attachments and how you would determine what attachments to make for the earnings. So remember that that is on those pages in the introduction. Okay, from the drop-down list on the leave form, notice that the leave form has an airplane in the corner, so you can identify what form you're on by that icon. And from the drop-down list, the very first leave that we're going to choose is sick leave, and we're on page 35. Remember that you have set these up to default to your policies, and our fake policy is that they accrue per pay period. Notice at the right of the sick leave it shows paid when used and not paid when used. So it's going to be very important to mark those correctly. Steve is an hourly employee, and when he goes on leave, he is paid for the hours he's away. And we're going to enter his hourly pay rate, and we're going to make sure that we mark paid when used. On the bottom left is the accrual, and it has defaulted into the accrual rate of a brand new employee, and we're going to leave that correctly for Steve. And for those of you who are in the middle of a year and you have leave balances, and your system, you've done payroll elsewhere, whether on paper books or you farmed it out to somebody else, you have leave balances that already appear. You can choose to enter the beginning balance in this box. What you need to understand is how you're going to do the conversion wage first. So if you're going to pull the data into the software using a conversion wage, you would have to know what you're doing with the conversion wage before you enter those. So we're going to enter, as in the exercise, a beginning balance of 210.80 and click the Next button. This is where we make our attachments. So notice that there is a box to attach to the earning, and then the circle is in the column that says WH. The WH earning is the earning that the leave will mirror when it comes to withholding attachments. So leaves don't have withholding attachments like the earnings do. What you do when you're on leave is you attach it to an earning that has the same withholding group. For those of you with a very simple setup, it's going to be simple. You have one earning, you mark the earning as the withholding group. So these two connections must be made. When you have multiple earnings, make sure you read those sections to understand which one of those earnings should be the WH earning. You can only choose one for the WH. Go ahead and click Next. And the software is going to default to show us the exact same setting as the earning. Now that may be correct in your instance, and it may not. Some people budget a different account code for leaves. Most people don't. It's not. The most simple setting is when you have the exact same account codes. But the software is showing us manual split and all of the account codes, and I can change that if I like. If my policy says that when this man is on vacation, his leave will be paid from one account code, I would change that to the no split method and place the one account code in the list and delete all of the others. But if his leave is always split between account codes by a percentage, and many of you with multiple account codes are doing that on paper, when a person with multiple account codes goes on leave, you multiply the leave by a percentage. So we're going to show you that example. What if in this instance that when he goes on leave, it is split 25% between each of the accounts that pay his wages? So I'm using the same accounts, but changing the split method so that I don't have to divide that out by hand every time this man goes on leave. So you can keep the same setting or you can change it. Go ahead and click Next. And it shows us that sick leave has been added. We're going to continue adding leaves. And Next. And from the drop-down list, we'll choose Vacation. And again, Steve is an hourly employee, so he will be paid when he goes on vacation, so the leave is paid when used. His hourly rate is $15 per hour. The accrual rate is correct, and I'll enter his beginning balance at 90.8 because I already know that's what I need with my conversion wage. Click Next. And I'm going to make the attachments. So I have to attach the leave to the earning, and I'm going to mark the earning as the WH withholding group. And go ahead and click Next. And again, I'm going to change it to percent split, and Bob is going to change those percentages. And then click Next. I'm going to continue adding leaves. We have holiday leave. From the drop-down list, we select holiday, and he is paid when used, and his rate of pay is $15 an hour. Our leave for holiday is credited manually, and the beginning balance is going to be 0. Go ahead and click Next. We still have to make the attachments, so we will attach it to the earning and mark the earning as the WH withholding, and click Next. We're going to go ahead and change the split method to percentage, and Bob's going to put 25% in each of those accounts. Again, you consult your policies to determine how that's done. And notice it's continuing to add, and our last leave is comp time. So continue adding leaves, and next, from the drop-down list, we choose comp time. And he is paid when used, and his rate of pay is $15 an hour. Now notice the comp time accrual rate is marked at 1.5. I'm going to consult my policies, and it says that Steve is the kind of worker that when he works overtime, he can choose, instead of being paid time and a half, he can have time off at a later time at the time and a half rate also. So I'm going to leave, according to our policy, the comp time accrual rate at 1.5, and his beginning balance for comp time is 10 hours. Click Next. I'm going to make the same attachments and the same withholding group attachment, and click Next, changing the percentage to 25 for each account. And click Next. That completes the leave that we add, and we can say I am done adding leaves, and Next. And it shows me all 6 steps are correct when I click Finish. The software gives me the opportunity to display the general information report. We say yes to that. And you would also print and review carefully. Did you enter all of the account codes? Notice that you can see attached leave. You can see the overtime and all of the accounts that you've chosen and all of the withholdings that you've attached. In the lower level, You can see the withholdings that you've given to the employee and the appropriation accounts, in addition to the split methods and accounts and percentages for the leave. You verify the health, dental, and deferred comp are set at the correct rate. So we really highly recommend you print this report, verify everything, and you can put a copy in the employee's personnel file. Notice now that Steve Friendly is added to the list. If we had made a mistake, we would mark him to edit and make any corrections that we would need to make. Our last employee that we add as an example is on page 36. So we're going to click the Add Employee button. This is an example of Ohio Police and Fire Pension Fund employee, and it's also an example of somebody using supplemental federal and supplemental state as additional withholdings. So it might not apply to you with the OP and F, but the extra withholdings are good to know how to do that. We'll go ahead and start with our Add Employee information, and Bob's going to complete the form on page 36. Remember that all of these sections on this form that you're looking at that are green must be completed, and you must, if you have an OPERS or an OPF member, you would have to put in the member date. For OP and FPF employees, you would have to also include their hours base. No, he's not an OPERS member date. Look at Bob. Bob is entering an OPERS member date, and he needs an OP and FPF member date. So see how easy it is to make a correction while you're on the page. And when you're an OP and FPF member, you need your base hours, and his, for our example, will be 160. If you're unsure what your base hours are, you would need to contact OP and FPF. He's got 0 deductions, and he's single. And once we've completed everything that we need, we click Next. And we're going to get the notice that this employee was hired after March of '86 and he's subject to mandatory Medicare coverage. We'll click OK to that message. We don't need to complete any of these additional items right now, so we can click Next. And it shows us that Day Sunny has been added as a new employee. So he's already in the software. If we get interrupted, we would have to complete that process through the edit form. Let's go ahead and add the withholdings to Mr. Day. So we'll mark Continue Adding Withholdings. The first we need is Medicare, and his regular at 1.45% is correct for our fake township. We'll click Next. And because he may be paid from multiple account codes in the future, I'm going to go ahead and choose Object Split as my method. If he only has one account code, it will still follow proportionately. So I can click Next. And the Fringe tab is going to complete with the same setting, and that's the way I'm going to accept that, clicking Next. I'll continue adding withholdings, and Next. Okay, from the drop-down list, we choose OP and FPF Fire, and notice that there's no default in the box. And the software is showing us the goal is 10%. That may not be correct at the time you're watching this video. You make sure that you're setting the correct percentage. So your goal should have already been edited to the correct employee withholding at the time. So Bob is going to meet the goal of 10% in our regular box because we don't have fringe or salary reduction. Once our regular amount equals the goal amount, we can click Next. We're going to also choose object split because I don't know if he'll be paid from multiple account codes in the future, and I don't want to have to change that later. So for OP and F, we're going to choose the Ohio Police and Fire Pension Fund, 215. And when we click Next, the software shows us the Fringe Benefits tab, and it defaults to the same setting. We're going to accept that. If you have Fringe, you would change it to what your policy state. Click Next, and OP and FPF has been added, and we can tell from the Fringe account and employer account columns that we've chosen object split. Our next withholding is going to be supplemental federal. So this is the first you've seen this withholding added. Click Next, and from the drop-down list, choose supplemental federal. Notice that it defaults into the employee with none. We're going to change that by marking amount and consulting our form. He wants an extra $10 taken out every paycheck. So Bob's going to enter $10 there, and we click Next. And it shows us the opportunity to use skip deductions for those 2 extra pay periods. But this gentleman wants the extra money to come out every single pay period. We'll accept the default, deduct from every pay period, and click Next. It's been added to our list of withholdings, and we want to add a supplemental state withholding. So continue adding withholdings and Next. From the drop-down list, choose supplemental state. Click the amount, and this employee wants an extra $5 taken out for state tax. Click Next. And I don't want to skip any pay period, so we're going to accept the default deduct from every pay period and Next. We also have a workplace earnings or income tax, Buckeye Village, so we will continue adding withholdings and Next. From the drop-down list, we choose Buckeye Village income tax. The rate is 1%. We click Next. Continue adding withholdings and Next. From the drop-down list, we add health insurance. Remember, you might have to use your scroll bar to see all of your withholdings. I consult my policy, and it states that I'll be withholding $37.50 from his paychecks. And when I click Next, we're going to skip the extra 2 pay periods a year. So mark for skip the pay periods marked below. The dates are March 30th and March 29th and August 30th, but we also have to mark the frequency. He's paid bi-weekly, so I have to choose a frequency for skip deductions to work. I can click Next and continue adding withholdings. Our last one is going to be dental insurance. From the drop-down list, choose dental insurance. He is going to withhold $2.81 twice a month. So 2 times a year we'll be skipping deductions. So on this screen, we mark skip the pay periods marked below. We choose the frequency bi-weekly and mark the pay periods we want to skip. And click Next. That completes our withholdings for Sunny Day. And we'll go to I am done adding withholdings and Next. Our next step is adding employee earnings. Go ahead and click Next and continue adding earnings and Next. The position for Sunny Day is Fire Chief, and since nobody else has been the Fire Chief, I would have to type in the name. From the Type drop-down list, we see that Fire Chief is not listed, so I choose Other. And his department that I've created, remember that you'll be consulting your own departments, is Fire and EMS. He is hired and he's unemployment eligible, so that setting is correct. The earning from the drop-down list is going to be salary. The frequency is paid bi-weekly, and his pay rate per pay period is going to be $1,480. Remember that the typical hours box should not be completed unless you have prorated leave, and then it would be required. Now, Mr. Day is an OP and FPF member, so I must enter an OP and F pickup, and we're using the example as pickup code A. We have no idea what your pickup codes are, so you have to consult your own setup for that and call OP and F if you have any questions. The frequency is biweekly, and these two items are required for OP and FPF members. Go ahead and click Next. And as of right now, he's only going to be paid from one account code. So the split method for his earning is going to be no split, and we're going to choose our account 2191 220 190. And go ahead and click Next. At this screen, we have to attach his withholdings, so we'll click the header checkbox to indicate all withholdings should be attached. Notice that Bob can scroll down and see that every one of those has a checkbox. Click Next, and I am done adding earnings. You may have to add additional earnings for your payroll setup. Mr. Day is salaried, and he doesn't have any overtime according to our policies, so we don't have to add overtime for him. You would consult your policies to determine if they would have them. So we'll mark I'm done adding overtimes and click Next. And he doesn't have any non-cash benefits, so we're going to go ahead and skip that step also. I'm done adding non-cash benefits. If you have non-cash benefits, you would add them at this point. Go ahead and click Next. And as far as leaves go, Mr. Day has all of the usual leaves. Let's go ahead and click Next. We will continue adding leaves, and from the drop-down list, choose sick leave. And this is an example of an employee who is salaried. So when he goes on leave, he's not paid extra on top of his salary. It will be very important to mark not paid when used for salaried employees. Notice that it takes away the pay rate box. His leave is accrued at 3.10 per pay period, so we can leave that setting as the default. And his beginning balance is 80.6. Go ahead and click Next. We're going to attach his leave to the earning, and we'll mark the withholding group. And click Next. I'm going to continue adding leaves, and Next. From the drop-down list, choose vacation. And he is salaried, so we mark that not paid when used. His 3.10 accrual hours is correct, and he begins his balance with 80.6 hours. We can click Next. And I'm going to make the attachment to his earning and the withholding group to the earning. Click Next. And continue adding leaves. From the drop-down list, choose holiday leave. He is not paid when used, and I want to remember to make that selection. The leave is credited manually, and he has no hours in his beginning balance. So we can click Next. Make the attachment to the earning and choose the earning as the withholding group, and click Next. And the final leave, he has comp time, so we will continue adding leave. From the drop-down list, choose comp time, and we will mark that not paid when used. Now, in our policies, to give you an example how it might be different for different groups of employees, our policy states that he has a maximum amount that he is allowed to have as a balance. So Bob is going to mark under maximum leave balance, limit balance to 25 hours. So that means at any given time during the year, he can never have more than 25 hours of accrued comp time. And he also has an annual limit. They will not let him earn more than 40 hours in a year. So he can only have 25 hours at a time, and he can't earn more than 40 accrual hours in a year. His comp time rate, according to our policy, is 1.5, so we'll leave that default, and he begins his balance with 0. So notice that you might have two different groups of employees that have different settings, and you would set those on the employees form. Go ahead and click Next. We're going to make the same attachments. We'll mark the earning and choose the earning as the withholding group, and click Next. We can now say I'm done adding the leaves, and when we click Next, it shows we completed all 6 steps. And again, you would click Finish, say yes to verify using the General Information Report, and review that carefully to make sure that you have added all of the accounts, chosen the correct split methods, and made all the correct attachments. If you had to make corrections, you can do that in the employee form. And that's the end of our Add Employee using the wizard. Thank you very much.